Welcome to Fear-Free Childbirth Podcast with Alexia Leachman, the weekly 9-month podcast to help parents-to-be look forward to their fear-free childbirth. Alexia is a pregnancy and head trash clearance coach and the author of Fear-Free Childbirth, How to Have a Stress-Free Pregnancy and a Positive, Pain-Free Birth. As a mum who's had 2 fear-free and pain-free births, Alexia wants to share with you how she overcame her pregnancy and childbirth fears so that you can look forward to having a fear-free birth too. Over the 9-month life of this podcast, Alexia will be sharing some real-life stories from mums and dads, insights into the latest childbirth research, inspiring tales from birth professionals, and some tips and techniques for clearing your fears and stresses. If you would like to receive a free chapter from her book, then head over to fearfreechildbirth.com, where you can also sign up for her email series, How to Have a Stress-Free Pregnancy. But now, it's time for the show.
Hello and welcome back to the Fear-Free Childbirth Podcast. This is me, your host, Alexia Leachman. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you're probably going to get a sense of the way that I approach things, and certainly the approach that I took with both my pregnancies and my birth. And if I was to sum it up, I guess it would be I took a conscious approach to my pregnancy and birth. I was constantly sort of asking myself, how am I feeling? What is this about? And trying to raise my self-awareness, because for me, that was what I felt to be the most appropriate route for me to take. And certainly if I want to have a fear-free childbirth, and that was certainly one of my major goals, I needed to understand what my fears were. And you can't really get your head around what your fears are unless you take a good hard look in the mirror. And so, sure, that whole process of raising your self-awareness and understanding what your fears are can in itself seem quite a scary prospect. But you don't have to do this stuff on your own. And there are lots of people out there that can support you on your pregnancy journey to help you to understand what is stressing you, understand what is making you fearful, so that you can prepare for a conscious birth and prepare for a fear-free birth. And today I'm going to be speaking to one of those people. Today I'm speaking to Julianne Mullen, and Julianne is a birth professional who works out of Northern Ireland, and she's got an incredible backstory and experiences to draw on to help her work with pregnant women who are taking a conscious approach to their pregnancy and wanting to really let go of some of the not so pretty things that may be hanging around them emotionally before they come into their birthing moment. So yeah, she helps people to shed traumas, negative thoughts, feelings, emotions, understand what their body is telling them when they're experiencing those pregnancy symptoms, and what that might mean in terms of some of the life factors that are causing a little bit of conflict for them, or some of the emotional stuff that might be causing a little bit of conflict for them too. So today's chat is a really, really interesting conversation. Julianne has got a wonderful Irish accent that is just so fabulous to listen to, and she's so gentle in her approach. So it's really, I think, the kind of podcast where you might want to just sit back, make yourself a cup of tea, get a couple of biscuits and enjoy, because our conversation really does jump around from things like what it means to be a conscious mama. What is a conscious pregnancy? What about if you have got traumatic experiences that you need to let go of? Maybe they're birth related, maybe they're not. And what your pregnancy symptoms might be telling you, and how you can get over all this stuff too. So it really is a fascinating conversation about how, you know, someone like Julie and myself, we both work what she calls with working with the invisible, the subtle stuff, the stuff that you can't see that might be having an impact on your life, on your pregnancy, and therefore on the birth. It really is a super conversation, and I really hope you enjoy it. Here's the time that I spoke to Julianne Mullen all about all that beautiful stuff. Well, hello, Julianne. Thank you so much for coming on the Fear-Free Childbirth Podcast. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Alexia, for inviting me.
Now, today we're going to be talking a little bit about birth trauma and being a conscious mama. But before we dive into all that juicy stuff, Julianne, would you mind just sort of sharing a little bit about your journey and how you came to work with women on their pregnancy and birthing journey?
All right, to introduce myself in this context, I would say that I have known 6 generations of women in my family. My great-grandmother, grandmother, my mother, me, my daughters, and my granddaughter.
Wow.
So I was in a park recently talking to my aunt who's in her 90th year, the eldest sister of my late mum. And I asked her about the births that her mother had. And she said, well, my mother had 9 children, 9 pregnancies, and she was very content. So I reflected on my birthing experiences in that, and could immediately say, oh, I had 2 experiences of home birth that were delightful, very rewarding, successful, and nobody was more surprised than me. So growing up, my mother was having babies, and she was very motherly, and she was very kind and gentle in the mothering. And we were very hands-on. So at 7, I was feeding and changing my brother, and at 10, I was minding 6 children. And
Wow.
yeah. So I was very well skilled in that whole the actual child and so on. But as a 9 to 13-year-old, I probably really went through a rough time and created a lot of fears in myself to keep myself safe from going out into the world. So in the family, feeling very safe and okay about husbands and wives and babies and children and family and so on. And they were very high values, actually, family life, support and caring for each other. And in the birthing, well, it wasn't really spoken of. But as time went on, I thought, you know what, I'm not going to do this. I'll be a nun, I'll go to Africa, I will avoid the whole thing of relationship. And yet I did go to Africa. I met my husband. We had our children there, and it was one day early in the pregnancy, the first pregnancy, that I said, you know what, I fancy having this baby at home. And his response was, oh yes, let's do that. And we set about creating a home birth that was in a context of, yes, we'll support you in whatever it is you want to do. And the experience was so affirming that 2 years later, I said, well, I'll have this baby at home also. And it was also phenomenal. And so I came out of birthing and home birth as being something that, even though I was really a bit of a scaredy cat, and I was a pain wimp, and I was in social relationship, I was not very confident. And also in terms of hospital care, going to the doctor, talking about your body, processes, things happening, I couldn't do any of that. So I set my mind to having the most healthy, ecstatic pregnancy that I could create, and so I was very much supported. Then we went to Holland because we were in development work. So in Holland, our children grew up and they went to primary school. It was all lovely, and I went to development studies at the Institute of Social Studies in The Hague. And really, only reason to mention that is that my early life began in social work. So we were at the end of the welfare model. Going into development work, they were at the end of the welfare model. Coming into a career setting and a path of wanting to be of service in my community, I was at the end of the welfare model and at the beginning of thinking about how do you empower people to do whatever it is they want to do, to be as creative as I find I could be, even though I had certain weaknesses and fears and phobias about things. And so when I came back we lived in Holland for quite some time, and I loved the support for women in the home after the birth. I loved that. They have a standard system where they bring someone to take care of the mum, take care of the babe, and keep the neighbours out during resting hours. I thought that was beautiful. And I realised just the other day that Anna Verval was probably just graduating from university when we went to live there. And I didn't meet her or speak to her or know about her until relatively recently, and I have great admiration for her.
She's fabulous. Fabulous. I went to one of her workshops recently, just utterly fabulous.
Oh, gorgeous. And coming from the Dutch system, I have a lot of appreciation for honesty, for integrity, for speaking out, for saying what you need, for asking for help, and for the professional response that I noticed people were getting was one of, yes, and what would you like to be called, and how can we do this for you? How do you foresee this path of treatment or care taking shape? And I thought, I find this all very wonderful. It's a very clear, clean way of speaking to a professional, to a mother. What do you need? Can we give it to you? Yes, you can have it. And let's just do this. So anyways, at the end of 9 years in Holland, we returned to Northern Ireland in the sense that I'm from here and my husband is Dutch. And that was at the end, almost, of the troubles in Northern Ireland. So I was coming into this environment, leaving behind all my skills in development studies. And I was looking to see if I could be of assistance to victims of the troubles. And what I learned in those years was that people who were victims either got on with it and their lives changed forever into a life of service, or they found it impossible to move forward and out of what had been done to them and what this meant in terms of loss. And I did a research study for one of the trusts here, and people who were victims of the troubles of all kinds, they lost educationally, they lost emotionally, they lost financially, they lost their self-esteem. And I thought, how awful to be a victim. So I think I delved into the topic of forgiveness in a big way for a few years. While I was here then, and when I came home, I was looking, as a mother of teenagers then, I was looking for how can I serve, and I was thinking trauma. And I chose specifically to study hypnosis and NLP as being trauma relief potential, having trauma relief potential, but also one was trans work and one was not trans work. And I thought I was choosing to do this for my society. But as it turned out, I realised that as I moved on then to spend some years learning Reiki and EFT, I became more and more aware that, it's about empowerment, self-empowerment. It's about being where you're at and in the moment saying, this is awful, what am I going to do about it? What can I do? And very often the only thing that we can do, stuck in a situation, is change our response. So over the years I was looking for lots and lots of ways of changing my response to what I was meeting in my community in terms of, for example, choosing to step out of the conventional way of working, stepping out of social work and psychology and becoming an energy worker, a healer, but someone who was very grounded. I thought it was important in classical traditions also. So a victim to me was someone who felt they were hard done by and could do nothing about it. So this work, funny enough, as I was getting into it, dried up. And that was to do with the recession, mostly. And in that moment, about 8 years ago, I thought about birth trauma, about my own births, how they were fine. And I don't remember the actual moment of, I can help some woman, but the inspiration came to me that I could do work that was something to do with way to go. And way to go in my community means, people say, how are you doing? And you say, there's a way to go before I get to where I'm going. And it gives an impression of long journey and lonely and hard work. In the American setting, it was that big guy, who was he?
Tony Robbins.
In the basketball
Oh.
In the basketball, Michael Jordan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Him, and he was a kind of well known at the time, I think. And his the basketball thing was, way to go, we made a goal. You know, way to go. It was teamwork. Way to go, teamwork got us here to winning this match, whatever it was. And in the moment of saying, I'm actually quite interested in pregnancy and birth, because this has been what has given me confidence in my life, probably. Way to go in teamwork, in service of women who are saying, I have a way to go, I'm finding this difficult. It seemed to come together. So I began saying, I'll teach antenatal classes locally. And what I realised doing that a few times was that I know nothing. I know nothing about the physical body. I know nothing about, the techniques of delivery. I know nothing of the language of birthing. And before I kind of gave it all up, I realised, but I do know something. And what I do know is that I'm anxious when I'm going, I have white coat phobia. I'm anxious. When I'm anxious, my blood pressure goes up. When I'm anxious, I'm a blubbering wreck. When I'm anxious, I'm coming across as being useless and feeling useless and unresourceful. So my NLP training kind of clicked in, and I was saying, gosh, the women I'm meeting are saying, we want to have a great pregnancy and we want to have a great birth, and you do hypnosis, don't you? And I would say, well, yes, but let's talk first. And what came to mind in that is, and what reflecting now on who I have worked with, quite a number of professional women have come to see me and ask for help in balancing their approach to life and work and pregnancy and the journey to motherhood. And in that, we've been discussing a lot what's actually going on for them now. And I very quickly, and what I do now always, is when someone's coming to me now, I'm saying, well, how was the conception? How is your relationship with the father? How is your body responding to the pregnancy, being pregnant? How do you feel about growing big? Do you feel blooming marvellous or what? And they would come and say things like, well, look, I got this baby in, but I don't know how I'm going to get it out.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. They would later in pregnancy say, look, it's getting closer, and I realise now I've been avoiding the whole labour birth thing. I've been avoiding it, and I don't know why. And I would say, all right, let's talk about it. And so I would get into my consulting mode, because I've done some consulting training and consulting in a counselling environment. So very structured way of asking people, what is going on for you now? And yes, they have a story, so we kind of skip through the story, but what I'm focusing in on are words they're using, emotion that's coming up, tension that's creeping in, words they're using, references they're making. And I would say to them things like, how was your birth? And they would say, oh, my mother wouldn't talk about it. Or they would say, my mother said I was the most difficult birth she had. And or they would say, my mother would never dream of it, but she's very disapproving of, my plans now. So I would be reflecting on, yes, you're pregnant now, but you were born once. How did you come into the world? And your mother, how was her influence on you as regards how you're going to deliver this child in time to come, or deliver or give birth to this child now? And what I was realising as I went along was, number one, I was having enormous fun doing the trance work on the one-to-ones, because in listening to the language they were using, I could always use the language of the mother to create the trance. And creating the trance work for mums became how she would see labour, and where her mind and her heart and her body and soul would be buoyed up by times when she was feeling really creative and ecstatic about life itself, and drawing on those experiences to then bring in the concept of, well, I like wave. A wave coming to a peak and then disappearing into the ocean is for me that cycle of tension for a minute or 2 minutes. It's manageable if you look on it as being like in a boat on top of the wave. A yoga teacher once said to us, if you can't do the thing, imagine you're doing it, try again, and then imagine you're doing it and try again, and then you just can find that you can do whatever it is you want. So this was my approach to making sure that they were gaining in confidence to take time out and relax in the time leading up to going into labour, to have something very specific to focus on in terms of how they could cooperate with their body. And then for nearly all the women I've worked with, we do a bonding moment where she meets the baby and says, are you all right in there, and when are you coming out, and do you know the way? And we're a bit humorous about it, but in order for her to let go some tension about, I don't know how I'm going to get this baby out, actually we're saying, do you know what, if the baby is choosing to come and choosing to come down the canal and choosing to be birthed and come into your arms, how would that feel? And they just click into, oh, that'd be magical. Isn't that the whole point of what we've been working towards?
Yeah.
So, lovely births, and people texting me and saying, I'm in my second birth now and I'm remembering from 5 years ago or 2 years ago what you told me then.
Amazing.
Women then were texting me and saying my baby's breech and they're threatening to induce me on Monday, and me able on the text or on an email or a quick phone call to say, remember what we've been doing, remember, or come and see me again and we'll do a deep relaxation, and in that deep relaxation maybe the baby will turn, but it'll turn if it wants to, because that's what babies do. But if it doesn't turn, that's something that we have to understand belongs to the baby. It's the baby's pathway and journey into the world may be straightforward and it may not be straightforward, but in this moment in time we're placing emphasis on cooperate with the body. So opening to be present in labour and opening to be present in the birthing moment are, to me, the highest value outcomes that we can go for.
And so for me, when I hear you say that, that seems to be quite a journey for some women to have to make to start being present, because so many people don't live in the present and don't have that kind of conscious awareness, I guess might be one way of describing it. And so do you find that the women coming to you are already conscious, or do you find that you're helping them on that journey to become conscious so that they can be mindful and present during the birth?
The latter. Definitely. I suppose when people reach me, they are often already bothered about something. And the bother can be on a scale of 0 to 10 or 1 to 10. I don't mind whether they're a little bit bothered about something or a lot bothered. I don't mind if they're bothered about something that is going on now, that they're afraid of in the future, or that happened in the past. My range of interest in them is to say, here you are, talk to me, I'm here to listen, and I'm going to reflect you to yourself, so that you get to hear what it is you're saying. I introduce them to a really conscious awareness of the life force that kind of surges up and down as they're speaking, and that are their feelings. And I point out to them as we go along that their feelings are registering in the body in various locations. So I'll be asking them, as you're speaking about this, where do you feel it in your body and what do you feel? And so they'll say things like, I feel tingling, I feel heat, I feel tension, I feel pain. And I'm making the connection with them of, do you know that life force that's coming up through you and wants to express itself is having difficulty getting out, and it's now registering as a symptom, the standard word for a symptom, a feeling. a sensation that you're bothered about. And when you begin to be mindful in this moment, so I kind of don't say mindful, but I bring them into that state of mindfulness and curiosity about how does your body feel and what is that feeling, and if it had a voice, what would it say, whose voice would it be, what message might it have for you, and maybe someone else, I'll say, you have this tension that you've mentioned in your tummy, what colour would it be if it had a colour? And they go through colours, and we do some therapeutic work, because always I'm in guiding, supporting and training mode when I'm working with people, no matter whether I'm on the phone or in person. I'm guiding them to reflect and be mindful on what's happening now, because they need to own their own experience and have that reflected to them so that they take it on and say, yes, I know now that when I have tension, it means that I need to calm down or whatever. I'm supporting them by saying, you're all right, as in it's okay that you have an anxious feeling or a nervous feeling or a mental pattern of, am I okay? Those are little feedback loops that I'm now going to make them aware of, so that they can say when they go home, I was only with Julianne for an hour or two, but I now realise that when I'm physically nervous or I'm getting a bit anxious or I'm going off on a spin, as a friend of mine used to say, I'm going off on a spin mentally, that those are moments when my body's telling me I have a bit of tension and I need to pull in, allow myself to figure out what's going on, and then that's where my training part comes in. I teach them stress management in the moment. I think I probably could introduce at some stage an ebook that has about 60 immediate stress management options, because I love them. And it's where I came from myself. I remember being so depressed and flat, really flat, as a mother of two little ones, and going, jeepers, I need to get out of here.
I know that feeling.
Yes, and can you in that moment ever get out of here? No, you can't.
No, you can't.
No, so you're in the moment. So I grabbed, at early stages, I grabbed lavender, and I got to know lavender intricately for all the essential oil applications that lavender could give. And then I went on to other essential oils, and my cupboard soon was filled with 30 bottles, and all for use on friends and family and for myself. But what I loved were the invisible effects, the subtle effects of the essential oils. And then I came across a man in Holland, just after he'd left actually, but he had little sugar pills, and he said they had a vibration, and I was curious. I phoned him up and we had a long conversation, and he said, what I do, he says, is I work with the invisible. And so that really got me excited. The invisible, the subtle, the atmosphere, the emotion, the known. The known is easy to work with because you just know what you know and you know what you don't know. But I was taken into the unknown. How do emotions affect us? How do resources from the environment soothe us? And so I've been applying those to myself, and then now women are talking to me, and it doesn't matter if they come to see me in the early stage of pregnancy. Like one girl did, she came for one session, and all she wanted to sort out in her own mind was she going to stay with the dad, or let him in, or not let him in? And how was she going? Where was she going to live? And by the end of the conversation, that was sorted. I didn't see her again. The baby was born, and I met her mum, and she said she's really happy. All good. Another person comes at the last minute and says, "Oh, I'm going to be induced. I don't want to. Can you do anything?" And I say, "Well, I can't do anything, but I can give you peace. I can give you relaxation. I can give you calm. I can give you tools to chill out." And people are grateful for that because it's something practical in the moment, and there's no judgment. There's no tell me your story again and again and again. It's just being really focused, I suppose, on that.
Now, you mentioned symptoms. I wouldn't mind just zooming back to symptoms briefly, because you mentioned how, when women are aware of what's happening in their body, and how you express that as being, our life force kind of communicating with us. And so immediately I'm just thinking about pregnancy symptoms and how, that those are ways that the body is using to communicate to us that there's some emotional stuff that may need attention, or there's some other life factors that we maybe need to take a closer look at, and it's our body communicating that to us. And certainly that was my experience during my pregnancy, where I use something called the Emotion Code a lot, which is a great book by Dr. Bradley Nelson, that you can literally just use this on yourself. So if anybody wants to sort of find out more about that. But I use that a lot to get rid of a lot of my own pregnancy symptoms during both my pregnancies. So I just wondered, it sounds like you might be doing quite a bit of work like that with women. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
So would you mind just sort of sharing a little bit more about maybe what you come across as being how, what kind of symptoms are we talking about here? And what kind of emotions typically do you find that maybe are the things that we need to address? So for women hearing that, because I think some women think, pregnancy symptoms, you just got to put up with it, and that's it. There's nothing much you can do about it. But, I think what we're saying is, well, actually, you can do something about it. And there are certain things that maybe if you address emotionally, the symptom will just go away, which was certainly my experience. And I think it might be useful for women to maybe hear your perspective on that and your experiences.
Oh, it's fascinating. Let me see where to start. There are a couple of things. I suppose morning sickness is the very first thing that people come up with when they say, I've had it for quite some time and I've been told that's normal, but now it's persisting. And the thing about morning sickness is that maybe the baby and the mother haven't quite connected energetically completely yet. Now, it's a bit of a far-fetched to go straight in there if you don't know anything about energy work, or if you don't talk about the soul, or you don't know how to express the unseen, the invisible. But what I'm saying is, any woman with any symptom, so physically she has tension, or rejecting food, or all right. So in my way of looking at symptoms, people are quite often, because the system's medicalised, they're quite often told you can expect to feel heavy, aches and pains, sick for a long time, and their glucose levels are going to be up or down. And at one level, that's okay if you're in the medical system and the interviews with the health visitor or the midwife need to cover those angles. But I find some women take that on very personally and say, am I sick or something? Is this isn't good. So of course my role there can be to ask them what's going on and see how they are emotionally, and then address the emotions that are going on for them. And sometimes the emotions are relating to how their body is reacting to having this baby in the first place, how they're reacting to their partner, how they're responding in their community and family. And then there's the whole community pressure of using medical terms even to understand where you're at in the system and so on. The women who come to me are saying, there must be more to the pregnancy than this. So let me just tell you how I'm feeling, and you help me make sense of it. What is this going to mean to me as a mother? And when we get talking, very often the symptoms that she's having are odd or out of place. And she says, do you know what? I think my mother had this. And then a second thing that has happened a couple of times recently is that women have said to me, I've symptoms, and my last birth was great, but my first birth wasn't great, and now my body's beginning to be in pain. I wonder, has it something to do with me? Am I holding on to something that happened in the first pregnancy or first birth? And in both situations that happened recently with me, it definitely was. The woman's body was expressing, in terms of a really odd symptom, something that had as an emotional foundation circumstances from a year or two ago, or 5 years ago. And when we cleared that up and said, yes, this is what's going on, and we did, I use emotion code also. I use tapping, EFT tapping. We can be tapping and talking. We can be clearing the emotion of what's going on now. We can, using the symptom as a barometer, we can say if the symptom is at a number 10 now of intensity, and we clear whatever's going on in a very creative way, let me just put it that way. By the time I'm finished, and I ask how's the symptom now, then they can say usually it's at a level of intensity of 1 or 0. And so I'm saying, well, there's only your feedback loops. You're now realising that you can change this because you've asked me for help. You've come to somebody who knows what they're doing, and we're using modalities that are much faster than just straight talking and talk therapy. So the symptoms, the symptomatic, the medicalisation, those are and community pressure. Some people come saying, I'm under terrible community pressure here, and they don't use that language, but that's how I see it. So, for example, what inspires me to say this is that I see the diagram in front of me of Caroline Mace, who says, most of us come in and live on the bottom of the bottom layer of the triangle, bottom third, if you like, and we're in community. We come into a certain tribe, we come into all the demands and the responsibilities of that tribe, and we take all our information and our reactions and responses to life from how the tribe say we should or could be doing.
So this is friends, family, people at work, that kind of thing.
Yes, and locally, I live in fields here by the sea and the mountains, and I live where I went to school, in primary school now, and the people I meet will meet me and say, you remember we all went to school together. It's a whole community. It's where you belong, where your roots are. Sometimes those never leave you, and sometimes you return to them, like I did. So the point is that the pressures of community are sometimes, with some women, to buy the pram and make the room ready, and they do that, and then when that's done, they're saying, hold on a minute, there must be something else here, because I'm not feeling great, or I'm a bit unsure, or I have no knowledge, or I need reassurance for this journey. And that's when they come to me. They're going to the next level of value in expressing themselves as individuals. So Caroline Mace has in the second layer of the triangle, she has the individual who says, well, I come from a community and a tribe and customs and traditions, but as an individual I like to express myself in art, in music, in dance, in mothering, like I'm mothering. And they look for new ideas, and that's when they're coming to me. They're looking for new ideas for how to handle the daily pressures and some of the unexpected things that crop up during pregnancy. So like people lose jobs, they lose a parent or a grandparent, they are forced out of their country, they are realising that they're leaving behind a career. And some people still do, but even for 4 months on maternity leave, they don't want to leave behind their career because they don't know what it's like to be in that space of becoming a mum. So all of those things, and they sometimes come to me for that. And then there's another layer on top at the peak of the triangle that I'm talking about, which is the spirit connection. And spirit connection is like are the people who say, I'm here for a purpose, I am here, I'm part of the universe, I'm here to make the world a better place, I'm here to be the best person and soul mate to my loved ones that I can be, and now I want to connect with the essence and the spirit of this child that I'm carrying. And sometimes in so doing, and this came to me when we were doing the victims work in the Troubles, Sandra Bloom came over from America, and she talked about the people who are under considerable stress in adult life. They respond, I don't want to say badly, but they respond with difficulty to new challenges if they are carrying the baggage of unresolved conflict in their own childhood, or if they're carrying, and then the emotion code and body code are brilliant for this, if they're carrying transgenerational patterns of poverty, of migration, of tsunami, or whatever. Those imprints are in there, and they try to express themselves. And because I really like that pattern, I'm always looking at every person holistically and saying, where are they coming from? Where are they urging to be? And how can I assist them to flow through all those levels? It's being pragmatic and encouraging them to be who they are in their own home, with their own family, not be trying to do anything different, but just to be able to pull in at certain moments when they're feeling a bit and say, oh, I'm okay, I'm doing the best I can, my best is good enough.
And so thinking about those women then that kind of are carrying those previous challenging experiences, whether they're traumatic or whether they're just, like you mentioned at the beginning, you know, they're in a bit of bother about it, and it's quite a lot of bother for them in their world, in their head. And so, you know, they're going into their birthing moment or coming into their final trimester and thinking, I really want to let go of this stuff. This is really clouding my own experience of things, of my life right now, and I just want to let go of it. And so it sounds to me like you work quite a lot with women in that, you know, maybe they've had a difficult first birth, maybe their own birth was quite difficult, maybe they've had a miscarriage or something like that they really just want to kind of move on from, and they feel they've got a way to go, and you're saying, hey, no, we can work with this, and it could be quick. How do you work with a lot of women like that, and how quickly can you work with somebody like that? Because I think some women do think that they've got to carry this stuff, and it's you can't just let go of it. But I guess you and I both know that you can let go of this stuff quite quickly. Yeah,
you can. They need to be convinced that they can let go stuff quite quickly, and the only way of achieving that is to speak with them and create some changes, and for them to notice, oh, I'm feeling so different now. We don't change history. We don't blot history out. No. We simply look at what happened as being it happened. I have a very structured way of doing this, but in short, I'm saying whatever happened. Who all was involved? What might their part in it all have been? What did you need? And if you ever had to go through that again, what resources? How resourceful would you rather be? And how do you look upon what has happened as in terms of your learning? What have you learned? Some people say, you know, I didn't think I was as strong as I am. And that's a learning. Yeah. And in a conversation that takes an hour and a half, we can achieve quite a lot when we're focusedly we're conversing like that. And at the end, I'm saying, well, you know, what would you like to do? What action do you think you can take to make sure this never happens again? And of course they can be very creative in that moment. In circumstances where a woman says, I am very anxious right this minute because I'm carrying the memory, the body memory of something that happened to me, I approach that very differently. And sometimes I use the body code, emotion code. Sometimes I use tapping. Sometimes I use hypnosis. And in fact, what I've done is I've developed my own system called Life Energetics, which simply means life challenges, energy solutions. And it's a way of saying, I know from hypnosis how important it is to use clean language. I'm listening to you, and I'm not partisan, so it doesn't matter to me whether a midwife said something, whether a doula did something, whether the doctor, whether your body gave up, whether the baby. My language, my listening, my replaying it back to you is carefully crafted so as to make sure that you are dissociated from and yet curious about how things went, and you always get an opportunity to replay it through how you'd have liked it to turn out. That seems to have an extraordinary impact on the brain. And it brings people, I suppose mostly what I'm doing is I'm bringing people from their head. You talk about brain trash, isn't that right?
Head trash, yeah.
Head trash. Right. So I'm bringing them out of head trash stuff, down that bridge into the heart space, and I'm asking them to allow this to replay and speak about, and make it speakable from the heart. And then there's a space created that allows them to say, maybe that person was having a bad day. Maybe the system didn't allow them to do anything different. Maybe this baby's pathway needed to be as difficult as it was because it has a sole purpose. And so it's so varied, but the outcome always needs to be that the woman is feeling in return to esteem for herself, for her own part.
When you described the way that you talk with somebody about, just sort of saying this has happened, and just the way you discussed that just really reminded me of a technique that I really like using when it comes to working with trauma, and that's the tapas acupressure technique, which is also known as TAT. Yes. And that's a really beautiful technique for getting rid of trauma. And I just think it's worth sharing now, because the lady that created it, Tapas Fleming, she gives away this process free on her website. So if you want to try and clear a trauma yourself from your life, you can literally go to tatlife.com, T-A-T life, one word, and you can get she allows you to download this process. It's a very simple process to clear trauma from a website that I've used countless times with my clients, but also on myself. And I used it when I was first pregnant, and I didn't realise that my own birth was deeply traumatic. And I've lost my mum over 10 years ago, so I've not really had a chance to talk about my own birth with her. So this has not been a conscious thing at all. It's been totally, you've talked about the body imprinting that, the memory in the body. And for me, my own absolute terrifying fears around birth came, without me realising it, from my own birth trauma. And I used the TAT process to clear my own birth trauma. And I was amazed at how much emotion was trapped in my body about that. And when I cleared that, my goodness, it was a huge emotional blockage. I was sobbing. There was all this stuff coming out over a period of about 10 minutes or so. But my goodness, I felt so much lighter at the end of it. And I just feel that it's just worth sharing that while we're talking about this kind of stuff, because it is possible for people to move on, and it doesn't. You just don't have to carry this stuff. And certainly the letting go of my own birth trauma, which was something I never really thought that could affect me at that point in my own life. I wasn't as immersed in the work that I do as that I am now. That it was pretty transformational. But an interesting thing happened to me in the last week where I realised I was getting triggered by seeing newborn babies quite a lot, and just getting really emotional about seeing babies. And I thought, hang on a minute, there's something else going on here. So I did some more. I asked my body some questions about what was going on, and apparently I've got loads of trauma from my past lives that I need to be cleared. My birth traumas from past lives, which is a complete surprise to me. And so I'm in the middle of working on that at the moment. And I just wanted to share that, because you just don't know where some of this stuff has come from. And it's about being open to that. And my goodness, when I was open to it, it allowed me to just move on and just feel so much lighter and much better prepared for my birth, emotionally speaking,
Mm-hmm. I'm so with you on that. And I'm also inclined now to make the point that practitioners who work with mums who have had birth and who have what I call pregnancy anxiety or birth trauma, they need to have done a lot of work themselves. You can't be in the space of people who need the kind of help we're offering without having cleared a lot of your own stuff. Okay. So one of my ways in which I know I'm cleared now is that I used to be terribly triggered by the One Born Every Minute program. I
think a lot of people are.
Oh, awful. Yeah. I can't tell you how awful and why. But And a lot of clearing work since then, and I can not bother going there now, which is a different thing.
Well, we're talking about One Born Every Minute. I have started a petition against Channel 4 here in the UK to portray a more balanced view of childcare in their programming, because that was how annoyed I was with the fact that they put series out after series of that programme that put fear into women, and yet they're not balancing the books by putting out some great, inspiring, positive content. And this is part of why I want to do this podcast, because there just isn't enough good stuff for women to hear that can inspire them and fill them with hope and joy about their birth, as opposed to terrifying them into a cowering mess, which I think is what One Born Every Minute does. So just thought I'd mention the petition. If you want to sign the petition, there's a link on the Fear Free Childbirth podcast, which I'll put in the show notes for today's podcast as well. Just, get on there. Even the guys in the US, please come and sign it. We need to change the world over here. So anyway, back to what we were saying about. So you've cleared your fear, all your triggers, or as many of your triggers as possible. And I think it's a really valid point. And certainly you mentioned my head trash work when, I sort of train this modality to people and when a part of the training is, hey, here's the technique. Before we train you anymore, you've got to go and clear your stuff, because you're limited in how you can help somebody if you're arriving into that moment where you are helping somebody else, if you've got all your own stuff that is potentially going to be triggered by what your client's bringing you. So I think it's a really, really worthwhile point to share.
And I think I could also add that my experience takes me then also to when babies are 6 or 8 weeks old. Quite often I get a phone call from the nurse who says, I have a mum here at the clinic who's exhausted and the baby hasn't stopped crying since it was born. And is there anything you can do? So I just say, get her to phone me. It's all I can do. And a few times that has happened, and the mum has texted me afterwards to say, my baby's latching, my baby's sleeping, even through the night. Thank you. And I'm going, how easy was that?
So what did you do?
I'm scratching my head. It's a combination of things. It is always checking how's the mum herself. The baby is the insomnia or the colic or whatever it is always the way in which the mum gets to me. And so I'm asking the mum, how was the birth? Nobody ever asks how was the birth when they're confronted with a little baby. They just say, how's the baby? So my job is to say, how was the birth? And sometimes it has gone wrong or something wasn't quite right, and we smooth and soothe that in the way that I've explained already, and that can be done over the phone. So we do that, and then I say, and your mum and your partner, and so I'm doing a kind of a scan check with her on how other things are in her life, and then I check for trapped emotions for the baby and for her, and very often. And then my daughter phoned one time with her first child, and she said, my son isn't latching on the left breast. He'll only take the right breast. So I said, that's fine, which is my usual response. That's fine. It's a way of saying, yes, that's happening. And I tapped on myself for him. And 20 minutes later, she texted to say he had latched on the right breast, and away they went. That was it done. Those things never come back because we're soothing the mother at where she's at.
Yeah. And I think it's a really worthwhile thing to kind of reiterate, really. It's the fact that our babies are just a reflection of us. They were connected to us physically, and they're within us for so long. And if they're at dis-ease, as it were, and not using it from the illness perspective, but just not at ease, then it's basically just reflecting back at the state that we're in. And I think, you're right to kind of approach that by heal mum first and baby will follow. And certainly now with my own kids, whenever I notice that they're in a bit of a wappy mood, I think, this is just me. I need to go and have a moment with myself, sort my own head out, calm my own self down, and babies, kids follow. And I had we just put an episode out with a lady who does pregnancy meditation, and she was, she's saying our babies are just reflective of ourselves, and so if you've got a baby that's crying all the time, not feeding, whatever it is, then just look in the mirror first before maybe just trying to solve it at the baby's end,
Oh, very much so, because you empower the mother to take responsibility for her own well-being. When she's feeling better, she looks at her child and says, that's a lovely child. I'm so proud of how well the child is doing. And that is a very desirable outcome. Because isn't it? We know it is.
Oh yeah, no, I know. It's wonderful, magical work to be involved in. Now, I'm just spotted the time. We've been chatting for ages.
Yes, indeed we have. It's been wonderful. It's been absolutely wonderful. I hope it's of some use in some way to some mums, and anyone who wants to phone me or connect with me via email can write to me at waytogobirthing@gmail.com.
So what about your website? Have you got a website that you could share with people?
You can find me at my name, so www.julie-Anne-Mullen, and that's Anne with an E.com.
Okay.
I'm working on EFT stuff at the moment, materials for tapping during pregnancy, the whys and the wherefores, and anyone who's really interested in hearing about it or reading can send me an email, and I'll put them on my list.
Okay.
This is new stuff, never done before, so I'm quite...
that sounds exciting. And you also mentioned during our chat a little ebook with 60 tips. Is that finished, that ebook?
The 60 tips are on a list, and I suppose I will enlarge on them and then put them in an ebook format. But same again, if anyone's looking for something right now, please don't hesitate to call me, and I'll share a couple of tips with you.
Brilliant. Well, you might get inundated, I think. So, I'm going to have all those links on the podcast show notes for today's episode, which is going to be at fearfreechildbirth.com. Julianne, so you can find out all that there. And well, I just want to say a big thank you, Julianne, for joining me on the podcast today. It's been absolutely fabulous just chatting about all this really good stuff, conscious mothering, being conscious coming into your birth, helping women to get over the trauma stuff, the bad stuff that's holding them back, and just being, that raising that level of awareness around the emotional stuff and how that can impact on our journey. It's just been really interesting, so thank you so much.
I'm thrilled to bits. Thank you indeed, Alexia, for the opportunity.
Now, wasn't Julianne absolutely fascinating? I really, really enjoyed that conversation I had with her. Now, since I had the chat with her, she's come back to me with a special offer for listeners of this podcast. So listen to this. You're going to love this. If when she was talking about some of that birth trauma stuff that resonated with you, and you've really got some deep, dark fears that you really would like to let go of before your birth, and I think you're going to be interested in what Julianne has got to offer. So basically, during the month of August, that's 2015, she's going to be taking 10 free 20-minute assessment calls from listeners of this podcast, and this is to help you to discover whether or not birth trauma is holding you back from experiencing absolute joy in your pregnancy. And so if this is something that you're interested in, then what you need to do is you need to email her at waytogobirthing@gmail.com. And that's way to go with way to the number 2. So waytogobirthing@gmail.com. And you just have to email her to get a slot. And she's only giving away 10 slots during August. So I think you're going to have to be quite quick based on the number of downloads I'm getting for this podcast. You're going to have to be super, super speedy. But that is not all. She's also going to give away a PDF to help you to achieve more joy in your pregnancy, birth and beyond. And to get your free PDF, all you need to do is leave an iTunes review for the podcast, and then just let me know here at alexia@fearfreechildbirth.com that you've done that, and you will receive a free PDF on how you can achieve more joy in pregnancy, birth and beyond. So she's being super, super generous, and you can just tell she really does just want to help people to really, she just wants to help. That's it. So simple. Just wants to help people. So if you're interested in either of those two offers, then please, the email to use to get the free session, the 20-minute session, is waytogobirthing@gmail.com. And otherwise, you leave an iTunes review. You let me know at alexia@fearfreechildbirth.com, and you will get a free PDF on how to achieve more joy in pregnancy, birth and beyond. I hope you've enjoyed today's podcast, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in. You've just been listening to Alexia Leachman from the Fear Free Childbirth podcast. If you enjoyed the show, she'd really love it if you left a review on iTunes or Stitcher, or shared it with a friend. And don't forget, to get a free chapter from her book, head over to fearfreechildbirth.com to get your copy, as well as finding other episodes in this podcast and more about how Alexia can help you with pregnancy and birth preparation coaching. Until next time.